Hello there and welcome to Totem Tuesday. On this edition of Totem Tuesday, I'm going to be looking at and answering some questions that you guys have been leaving on my channel. Well, it's not answering so much, it's just more putting my opinion or my slant on the questions answered, because they're really, really interesting ones, and thank you very much for leaving your questions. If you have any queries or questions, do feel free to leave them here on my channel underneath the video, and I'll go through them and try and do as many of them as I can. So this week's Totem Tuesday, this question is from the lovely Fizzy Bee. Hello. And Fizzy Bee asks that I seem to be influenced by Native American shamanic belief and practice. They were just wondering how I see the arguably more British traditional witchcraft familiar, connecting to the idea of animal totems and power animals. Are they the same or different, in my opinion? And I really like that question, and it's got me thinking, so that's always good to get this little grey matter going. Yeah, really good question, and to be fair, what I believe the base of it all is it's all very, very similar. End of video. No, I'm joking. Could be the end of the video. But at the heart of it, I feel like from the beautiful visual of how a traditional cottage witch or healing woman, medicine woman of hundreds, if not 1,000, 2,000 years ago, how they were working with animal spirits, and how a Native American shaman or shaman in Lapland, I feel like at the heart of it, it's the essence is still the same. They're using the same energy, and that is working with an animal spirit to create some difference, either a spiritual difference, a healing, a journey of some kind, to gain knowledge, to change perspective. That's how I see it at the heart of it. But it is really interesting because I feel like it's very weighed heavily towards Native American thought, is because this is probably the newest, I guess, records and documentations that we have of traditional medicine men, women, shamans using power animals. That was, in theory, I'm very much drawn to the Celtic shamanism, and that's a very loose term because obviously, as I've said many times in all the same videos, the word Celtic is really a little bit of a falsehood, and the Celtic tribes were many, many different tribes, but they did work seemingly in similar ways. They did have similar systems and lifestyles, beliefs, but we're using an umbrella term of Celtic because it's quite nice, it's a nice word. I feel that I'm very much drawn to Celtic shamanism and how our ancestors of this land, of this area, would have worked. That is really interesting to me. So when I'm thinking about doing Totem Tuesdays and when I'm researching it, I'm trying to find as much out globally, really. I'm very interested in global, we're one tribe and we all are connected, and I feel at one point we're doing very, 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 very similar things, but in our own way, and how things have grown and developed in our own way. So it may sound American Indian-like, but I think that's just because that's the language we have, because we don't really have the language that our own ancestors would have used, because it's a longer time ago, and the Druids are famously known for not writing things down, and this would have been stuff that's, a couple of thousand years old, that has survived through traditional witchcraft, that has survived, in my mind, through pagan beliefs, and that have been brought back into a much more welcoming and open society now. So I feel that traditional British witchcraft and the idea of a familiar is, in essence, on the same lines as a Celtic shaman would have been, and also, therefore, how a Native American shaman would have been. So as I'm saying, the wording that I use often, like power animal, totem, it's because that's what we know, that's what we've been brought over the last couple of 100 years. We've been shown this is what this is, because that's the language we have, but we don't have so much a language for our own ancestry, which is quite sad, but still, it's all cool, it's all fine, it's all linked. So I don't see myself as particularly heavily drawn to Native American stuff, though I think that it's beautiful and wonderful, just because I don't have that lineage, I don't live on that land. I love it, I'm fascinated by it, as I'm fascinated by, in Siberia, how they work, and in Tibet, I'm interested in all these areas of the world. So I feel like it's one universal way of working, but like all cultures have different ways of doing it. I'm not repeating myself too much there. I feel I've got a feeling that I am. With the idea of a familiar, we do have a unique slant on things. In this big umbrella term of shamanism and working with animal spirits, the word familiar is very loaded, isn't it? Just like the word witch is very loaded because of a persecuted past that we have in Europe and America and with the witch trials. So, you know, I have seen some people who found the word familiar a very negative word because it's loaded with that energy. But in the same hand, then, you know, witch should be a loaded word as well. And I do openly, happily reclaim the word witch as a beautiful word. So with familiar, I think it's something interesting because I never actually use that word particularly myself, though I do feel it goes hand in hand with a totem, because a familiar spirit is an animal spirit that guides you, to my mind. Of course, the ideas written down around the 1600s are that you know, there could be an animal, particularly a cat or an owl or a toad, all the things you see in Halloween images now. Because these are out there animals, they're the more liminal animals. They're the ones that belong to the night, that belong to the dark, that belong to the mysteries, the secrets. They've been linked very much with witches, and that's awesome because we love cats, we love owls, we love these animals, and we love them maybe because they're just so seductive in that way. They're so much more aware of the sensitivities than we are, or we've become. So they were there were traditional familiars, but also traditional familiars, from what I've looked at in the witch trial stuff, which is not what I'm doing this video about, is they were basically fairies, weren't they? They were basically fairies, which again, witches, New Agers, pagans, shamans, we all tap into that energy. Elemental spirits, you've got, you know, even up to John Dee, summoning beings to find things for him. So everyone that's into magic and to paganism may not go that far, but has an interest or a feeling about nature spirits. And fairy, there's obviously been a real resurgence of interest in fairy and nature spirits, which of course were called at times of persecution demons. So to my mind, that working with a familiar spirit is working with a fairy energy or an animal that you feel really drawn to. Also, witches and people of spiritual nature have a natural tendency towards animals and nature. They may, you know, to people that were looking at them, they may have felt that, you know, they had a great connection, a natural connection with animals. So that would have been seen as particular to witches, maybe, that they felt more connected. Because don't forget that maybe our ancestors didn't see animals as animals. They saw them as brothers and sisters. They saw them as fellow beings on this planet, rather than we are so much better than them, they are below us. That, you know, we were much more part of the fabric of life, which is how I see the world as well. So when everyone was going all batty about witches and paganism, the witches would have been seen as different and weird because they would have connected more with animals and nature and all those things that were now being frowned upon. So yeah, I feel that the familiar spirit is very similar to what a shaman and a wise woman would have worked with in our past and still do today. The use of a familiar as an actual animal, or the familiar taking form of an actual animal, is an interesting idea too. I love the imagery of the witch and her cat, and that the cat being the familiar. And I know a lot of people that do feel that their cats or their mice or their dog or their toad or rabbit is their familiar. And that's awesome too. I think that's brilliant. Again, it's not a word that I often use. Again, when I'm even working magically as well, I work in a very friendly manner. I've seen lots of people demanding and commanding, and there's definitely a time for demanding and commanding. There's definitely a time for saying, "Oi, you, get out of here," in a spiritual sense, or "Hey, I need some help pronto." When you're working with energies. But on a regular basis, I think I've said this before, I don't go around commanding and demanding anything comes to me. I'd hope that through a bond and a friendship, that would be cool, that they would be fine to come and, to work and help me. So that's how I see all animals that you have around you and animals that are in a spiritual sense around you. So, yeah, I do see it a little bit differently maybe than but I love it when people see that, the picture of their cats as their familiar. And definitely some animals are more drawn to working with you when you cast a circle. You maybe have one animal or two animals that are just like, I want to be part of this circle. This is where I feel energy-wise I want to be. Where some animals are a bit oblivious and like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just going to roll over and go back to sleep. So they could be seen as familiars as well. Again, I kind of see it's more of a fabric of energy that we're all working with each other or not, in that way. But I think it's a really brilliant question, and I also would really, really value your opinions on this as well. Do you go out there particularly in working with a familiar, or do you work more on a spiritual totem level? And I also think interesting, I'm going back to what I was saying a minute ago with the witch, the familiar and the witch, and that the witch is often seen to turn into this familiar. The witch is often seen to become this demon, this beast, or this animal. And the cat or the blackbird or the crow or the horse would be seen as the shape-shifting form of the witch. And this is really interesting as well, because again we're going exactly back to what our Celtic ancestors and even the tales in our own myth here in the United Kingdom, where you have Ceridwen and her lovely magical cauldron, and Gwyn tastes a little bit of the cauldron accidentally and then realises he's in trouble and runs away, and with his new heightened knowledge he turns himself into a hare, and then Ceridwen changes into an eagle, and they change into different animals to escape each other. And that shows the shape-shifting form that's been inherent in our culture, in our magical culture. And also that by drinking that cauldron of wisdom and knowledge with the heightened senses, you can shape-shift, you can change into an animal, and you can use that energy to change and to work differently, just like a shaman would, just like a witch's familiar would. So there's this, again, it's going back to me repeating myself again, but the similar fabric. But I do find it fascinating that this is the idea of the witch's familiar now is another branch of a big tree of how everyone in the world who's working in this way is working with animals. And I think familiar again is one thing to have to realise is with, obviously, at the times of the witch trials, that many, many, many cats and other animals were horrifically killed with their woman who was also horrifically killed. So the bondship and the kinship between the animals is an amazing thing, but people can find it intimidating and scary as well. So that's why some people stay away from the word familiar, because it reminds them of this. Okay, I don't necessarily feel that because we still use the word witch, so it's just throwing a whole load of ideas about what a familiar is and what a totem animal is into this big cauldron. And I would love to know what you guys think as well, to see how you work with this. For me personally, as I said, I work with all animals and energies, with stones, with trees, for different things. And I have my totems, my power animals that I work with when I journey and when I go on meditations, etc. And I feel in the heart of the heart that's exactly the same as working with a familiar. So I hope I haven't gone around the houses too much, and I hope that made sense. And thank you to Fizzy B for this question. And I hand it over to you now. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Do you have thoughts on this? Experiences? Do you agree or disagree? Or not at all bothered? I do have another question to do, because I spent so long going on about this. I will do the question by Label Me Witch for another week. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a lovely time. Bye.